Hi, we're Group 5, and we're doing the Carlsberg and Emerging Markets case study. My name is Lauren Lepien.
My name is Dan Kaiser.
And Roy Knudsen.
So, Carlsberg has a fairly long history. Started in 1847 and expanded from there and continued to grow. In the past couple of years, they've expanded into Eastern Europe and Russia. They're in a fairly good position in Europe. They have access to the Nordic countries and Western Europe as well. We have 75 breweries around the world by 2007, and there's 33,000 employees, so it's a fairly large company. The current strategy for Carlsberg is focusing on Western and Eastern Europe and Asia as well. Their values are expanding and increasing their earnings in new markets because the current market in Western and Eastern Europe is fairly saturated. So they're looking to grow their business a little further into Asia and South Asia as well. The core competencies, Carlsberg is ambitious, they're innovative, they're responsible in economic and environmental, they're honest, and they want to create a high quality product for their consumers that doesn't break. So ways to maximize opportunity would be to identify problems from opportunities and have first mover advantage into China and Asia. There's not a lot of Western and Eastern European brands there now. So they're trying to attain market share in Western China to expand their brand and create revenue stream. And the Chinese market can become a top revenue earning market. There's a large population there and a demand for lower cost beer.
Next, we're going to explain the Carlsberg SWOT analysis. Carlsberg's strengths are they're a world leader. They were early innovators in the industry. They have a strong presence and brand recognition in the industry. Some of their weaknesses are poor management, bad mergers. The merger with Orkla and Norway specifically was very bad. It set them back 3 years in their adoption in the Chinese market. They're using old legacy policies from the original founder, which are out of date and don't really apply. And again, bad debt for mergers. Also, a lot of debt was created in the merger with Thailand that failed with Chang. Opportunities, the market's growing. There's an interest, especially in China, with Western culture. The trend with, they like the lifestyle. They like the drinking the beer. It's becoming more popular. There's a lot of immature breweries in China. This is a great opportunity for Carlsberg to move in and maybe acquire them and add the mature swing to them. And then there's taxes on liquor in Europe and in China. This affects, it's a great opportunity for beer because people are drinking less liquor because it's more expensive. Weaknesses, there's a lot of competitors, market's saturated. Heineken and Anheuser-Busch attempted a joint venture in China, and actually they're in talks to do that, so that is a weakness. Carlsberg's got to get in early. There's declining beer sales in some regions because of the health conscious movement. People are trying to live a little healthier. Alcohol awareness is on the rise. And to combat the liquor tax, some governments are starting to put tax on beer, not only to increase sales back on liquor, especially in Europe, but also to deter people from drinking as much beer as they are. Next, we'll talk about the STEEP analysis. That's the social, the technology, the environmental, the economical, and the political. First, social. Health-conscious society all around the world. Health-conscious lifestyle. Disposable income, especially in China, their dollars don't go towards luxuries and commodities like alcohol. The market needs to, the breweries would probably need to work on their strategies as consumers are becoming older, society's becoming older, people are living longer. So they got to think about that and how they're branding with the aging societies. Next, into technology, we'll talk about manufacturing. Carlsberg needs to look for new ways that are efficient and effective and lean to become cost effective and possibly lower overhead to become more profitable. They need to make an investment and centralize their manufacturing rather than having a whole bunch of small distribution and manufacturing points. They can also look for a different type of technology for packaging beer. There might be a better way that's not only technological but also environmentally friendly. Next we'll move into economic. There was an economic crisis in Europe. This really did not affect the European market on alcohol because if you look at the economies of scale, even in a crisis situation, Europe had the people of Europe had more spendability, would still spend money. However, in China, again we go back to disposable income. There's not a whole lot of disposable income. However, raising GDP in the country will get people out of poverty and they'll have more money to spend. So there's growth opportunity there. Environmental. The world's becoming more environmentally conscious. People are purchasing, have the purchasing power in their wallet. If a company's not doing good things for the world and the environment, they will choose not to purchase from those companies. There's a corporate responsibility to not put pollutants into society and out in the world. Carlsberg has an initiative called the Consumer Social Responsibility, CSR, where they're trying to inform not only their employees but also the consumers about environmental awareness. And lastly, we have political. Public health is a big problem. Governments are really looking into public health. It's costing governments lots of money. So they're raising the alcohol awareness, you know, the effects of drinking a lot of alcohol, what it does to people, how it affects health. These costs come back to the government, especially in a place like China where everything is controlled by the government. So to swing that, they're doing a lot less advertising in China, so Carlsberg needs to take that into consideration. They're trying not to make it look so cool and so fun. They don't put it at sports venues because sports are supposed to be about health, so they don't want to advertise beer. And lastly, they're raising taxes in hopes that that will also limit sales of Carlsberg or any kind of other alcohol.
Our first option we came up with would be an expansion into India. There were a couple of options. You could either do greenfield investment or an acquisition of a current brewery. Greenfield investment looks to be the best option because there are not a lot of breweries in India currently. So an acquisition would be fairly hard to find, and we'd have to probably update the technology and the brewers and stuff like that. Barriers, there are a lot of barriers unfortunately when it comes to expanding into India. There's a very high import tax, about 100% on beer just imported into India. There's a fairly low consumption rate compared to the United States at about 20 gallons a year consumed in beer in the United States. In India it's only about a half gallon a year per person. So it's very, very small. There's not a lot of people drinking beer because it is a luxury and there's not a lot of disposable income in India. A lot of companies, they have a lot of hoops to jump through when it comes to exporting into India. They need permission from a state officer to export, and they need license to sell and transport alcohol. And if a company decides to do its own distribution, they would need a distribution license. And unfortunately, those licenses are very few and far between when it comes to distribution. Various states in India have different dry days, which means that the liquor, you're not allowed to sell any sort of alcohol on those days. They vary from state to state, and there are various national dry days, like national holidays, voting days, stuff like that. And then there's 29 states in India, and unfortunately 5 of them ban alcohol, sale of alcohol completely. So about 5% of the population wouldn't have any sort of access to our product at all. It doesn't seem like a very feasible option right now for Carlsberg to expand into India. There is a very high growth rate, about 10%, but with the low consumption rate and the hoops to jump through in various dry days, it just seems the cost outweighs the benefits when it comes to expanding into India.
Our second option would be to put an investment in the supply chain for all of Carlsberg's current establishments. This would include Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, and wherever else beer is sold by Carlsberg. Optimizing the distribution structure, logistics, and procurement would free up income for future investments elsewhere. Centralizing and standardizing the procurement and procedures would also help towards that goal. The major part of this would be the implementation of a collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment system. This limits your carrying costs of your inventory by 30% over 3 years, and it also helps with predictability of your future revenues. Now we're going to talk about the third option we've come up with, which is to build a new brewery in China. The venture would be a greenfield investment. We came up with the cost of $82 million for the brewery based on a brewery that Saab Miller built in central China in 2004, and that was the cost of theirs, was a little bit over $82 million, so a comparable brewery would be about that much. To get into China with a greenfield investment, there's a lot of high barriers to entry. There's a large feeling of protectionism from the Chinese government, and they have a lot of ordinances in effect that try to limit the transition of foreign companies into China with new businesses, and that would be something that would have to be overcome in order to successfully make an establishment in central China. Another issue with this option is that there's a low product differentiation. The Chinese consumer traditionally only kind of drinks one type of beer. They stick with what they drink. They don't really go for new flavors unless there's a reason to. If it was cheaper, then maybe they would. But with the high barriers to entry and the cost of the brewery, we would have to charge probably a premium in order to make back the money that we've invested. And when you combine all of that, if this new flavor or taste does not go over well in China, then we could be completely out of the market within only a few years if no one's buying our product. So to counter that, we think the best option is to enter a joint venture with an established Chinese brewery company. We chose Yanjing Brewery Company Ltd. Because it's the third largest brewing company in China. As far as the worldwide scale, they make the sixth most amount of beer through all the companies in the world. They have an established, strong, loyal customer base in China, but it has kind of stagnated over the past couple of years, which is why they're seeking a foreign investor to come into the company and kind of change things and help hopefully spark their sales again. So in order to implement this joint venture with Yanjing, I believe there would be a negotiation process that would have to take place. The best case scenario for Carlsberg would be to get just under or as close to 50% for approximately $1.5 billion. That's a best case scenario. Their company is currently worth $3.6 billion. So that would be fair because they are pretty actively seeking a foreign partner, and it would be wise to take advantage of their situation. I believe this process could be implemented in 2 years. A lot of that time frame would have to be dedicated to the contract portion of the implementation, because historically that contracts that Carlsberg has drawn up with their joint ventures have not gone well. Chang did not offer the companies that they said they would in the contract, which created hostility between the two companies and led to their failure. After the contract is drawn up and the negotiation is complete, I believe that there would be a separate conversation that would go on about a CPFR supply chain implementation to Yanjing's processes. This would help lower the price of their beer, and in China it's a very important aspect of purchasing because they don't have the disposable income that the Western cultures do to spend on beer. And then through this negotiation, this implementation, this joint venture, Carlsberg will learn the Chinese market, which is something that they have not been able to do thus far in their ventures into China. Obviously, there's a lot of risks that would go into the merger process. For one, as I mentioned, there's a history of bad contracts with Carlsberg. Chang and Orkla are the two obvious ones. They both ended with the venture falling out. Chang set Carlsberg back in China for 3 years because they were stuck dealing with breaking apart that joint venture, and then Orkla, they had to buy them out because nothing was going the way they had drawn it up in their original contract. So this contract that they do come up with needs to be very detailed, very strict, and good for both businesses, not just one. The other risk that could go wrong would be the CPFR implementation. Everybody has to be on the same page for that CPFR implementation to work. There's a lot of business information being shared by both sides, and if the company that you're dealing with is not reliable, then that could cause a whole world of problems for you. As far as financials go behind the merger, as I said earlier, the lowest percent we would take would be 33% for $1 billion, and the CPFR implementation would have to be done within 1 year. From the return on investment standpoint, Yanjing makes, as recent as 2015, they made $113.6 million US. If you took 33% of that net income, you're looking at close to $34 million per year, which if you took that number, $34 million a year, over a 30-year period, that would be when you broke even with your original $1 billion investment. However, that's a very general number without a lot of future forecasting to go into it. My point being, the price of Yanjing is currently $1.95 per can, almost $10 per six-pack. After the CPFR was implemented, I believe that the price could go down to $1.50 per can and $8.50 per six-pack, which would undoubtedly it would spark your sales in China, because that, like I said earlier, that's a major sticking point for their purchasing power.
So in conclusion, we had 4 options. India was a no-go because of the opposition. There's trade barriers, there's the cultural things with the dry days, the low disposable income, so the opportunity just wasn't there. Supply chain management, that was more of an internal way to get some money back, kind of increase revenue. However, we don't break into an emerging market, which would be the best way to grow revenues. So we decided to go with China, and there was 2 approaches we could have done there. We chose not to do the greenfield. First of all, that would be very expensive to start all over. The tastes of the people there, the Chinese don't like to change things too much. If they're happy with one flavor, they're pretty much going to stick with it. So the most profitable option was to go in China into a joint venture with Yanjing Beer. This is the easiest entry point. They're established. They have a small consumer base. They're kind of immature, but Carlsberg is a very mature brewery, so we can take what we know and make that small brewery grow. The government's constantly seeking foreign investment. So by bringing Carlsberg in, we're growing their economy and their gross domestic product. It's a win-win for everybody in the joint venture. Thank you, and that's it.